start recording.
You're good to go.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we have a quorum, so we're good. So good evening, everyone. My name is Tori Kanelopoulos, Senior Planner and the Staff Liaison for the Village of Rivanna Community Advisory Committee. So this meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Emergency Ordinance number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are Dottie Martin, Linda White, Dennis Odenov, Neil Means, Paula Paganakis. And then we have Planning Commissioner Rick Randolph and Board of Supervisor Donna Price. County staff in attendance for this meeting are Carolyn Schaefer and Tori Kanelopoulos. The persons responsible for receiving public comment are the Village of Rivanna Community Advisory Committee. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are the Albemarle County calendar. And tonight we have officer elections, approval of meeting minutes, if possible, CAC new member orientation, discussion of the Breezy Hill rezoning application, liaison updates from the commission and board, and then new and old business. So we'll go ahead and start with the officer elections. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. So hopefully you can all see that. These are the three positions that we have available for Village of Rivanna. So for the chair, be running and facilitating the meeting, trying to help ensure that anyone who wants to speak during the meeting has a chance to do so, and then helping coordinate and set the agenda, talking with other CAC members as needed to figure out what might be topics of interest. And then vice chair would step in for the chair when needed, when the chair is absent, if they need any assistance with coordinating and then running the meeting if the chair is not available. And then secretary takes meeting minutes during each meeting and sends the minutes to other CAC members for review and corrections. So I will stop sharing so we can see everyone's screen. So would anyone like to make a nomination for the chair position, or would anyone first like to express interest in that position?
I'd like to nominate Dennis Odenov if he's willing to serve.
I'll second that.
Third.
Fourth.
Great. Well, we can close the nominations and then motion to approve Dennis as chair.
Neil,
I have a question
anything?
before you do that.
Sure.
One of the duties you list is for the president is help set the agenda. What does that mean?
Sure. So it's up to the whole group to help set the agenda, but a lot of times what the chair will do is, help run the new and old business section at the end of the agenda, try to reach out to CAC members or other people in the community and see what topics might be of interest and send those along to staff.
I've been on
I was
lots and lots of committees, and always the chair sets the agenda. That's the way it works.
and I was chairman of this committee for 6 years. We always set the agenda, and then I contacted your counterpart to help set the agenda. So that county was helping. We always contacted county to see if there's subjects that we should include. But we set the agenda because it was our committee. So I
Sure.
have a problem with this.
Yeah, and I can maybe restate it. So it's setting the agenda. I just wanted to be clear that, it is up to staff to check in with other county staff to see, who might be available. If there's a topic of interest, it might not be possible
No
to,
problem.
yeah, set it up that month. But sure, it is, yes, the CAC to what should be the topics of interest.
Okay, glad you clarified that. So was there an election yet?
Yeah, I think we just need a motion for approval for Dennis for chair.
Didn't
I
we
move to approve.
actually take a vote?
Yes, and then go ahead and vote on that motion.
Okay, I make a motion that we vote for Dennis.
Second, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and then all in favor, raise hands, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. So is there anyone who is interested in the vice chair position or who wants to nominate someone for that position?
Linda
I
White
nominate-
has done this before. She's willing to be the vice chair. So in Dennis's absence, Linda will at least know how to step up to the plate if Linda's willing. Linda, are you? If you are, I'll nominate you. You can get me back later.
I can get you back. Okay.
So is that
Um,
okay?
Yeah,
nominate
that's an
Linda?
okay.
Did you nominate Linda?
I did. I nominated Linda as vice chair.
Second motion.
Okay, so let's go ahead and have the vote. All in favor?
Our nomination
Aye.
closed.
Aye.
We're sort of skipping a step here and letting
Oh,
other people.
sorry about that. Well, we'll go ahead and close that, have that motion pass. And then we have a secretary position for taking meeting minutes.
You know,
I will-
Dottie Martin has.
I will volunteer to do that.
I nominate
nominate
Dottie
Dottie
Martin.
Martin.
Nominate you, Dottie.
If somebody has a burning desire to take notes.
Dottie's great.
Looks like we have the nomination, yep, and then motion.
Make a motion that Donnie Martin be elected secretary.
Second,
And all in favor? Aye.
I,
Aye.
Good.
Great. All right, well, we have our positions all filled, so that's perfect. And then we can go ahead and move right into,
So I could take over at this point?
yeah, if you want to, sure.
Sure.
Thanks.
So,
Been here, done.
so we're up to approving the minutes of the meeting we last had. Secretary, like to read those minutes?
Yeah, I can if you want.
I wasn't here.
Well, you weren't, you had no power back then.
Correct. I still don't.
All right. Megan did an overview of the Breezy Hill project, which is a by right development with 80 lots and two entrances.
Okay. I got
Charlie
that.
Armstrong did a presentation. His major points were, last time they were asking for an R4 zoning, now they're asking for an R1. The wetlands and streams will not be disturbed. VDOT requires 2 connections, so they will still have to have an exit on Running Deer. They're leaving the lots that back up to Running Deer empty. There will be walking trails around the property. Dennis asked what can be done in the future with those vacant lots and who owns them. Charlie said anything can be done with them, and Southern Development owns them, same as before. Dennis said there should be a buffer between Running Deer and Breezy Hill. The Running Deer Road is half in the growth area and half in the county. It makes more sense to have a second connection to Rivanna Village than to Running Deer. And then Dennis asked if their attorney would look at that. Charlie said, we will, but don't count on it being changed. Are the ponds aerated and do they have some kind of mosquito prevention? Charlie said, I don't know, but with today's pond technology, that usually is not necessary. Will there be any recreational activities in your green spaces? Only passive activities like walking, no recreational equipment. Dennis asked, the Planning Commission has said that the net density should be used, but you are using the gross density. Charlie said the master plan mentions gross density. Dennis said the land use maps of Breezy Hill show areas that cannot be built on and is a false assumption that you are following the master plan. It's actually 1.39 units per acre net density and not 1.0 units per acre density. Question Neil asked, are the trails just for Breezy Hill residents? Charlie said yes, unless the county takes them over, which they don't think will happen. Charlie explained where the utilities would be located, and it would be possible for some residents outside Breezy Hill to connect to city water and sewer if they were close to a hookup point. Rick said any expansion of water and sewer must be a board of supervisors decision and not the developers. Paula asked, it looks like the larger lake is landlocked. Yes, it is. Will there be HOA, and can the HOA roads be private and public? Charlie said, yes, there will be an HOA. Megan said the Board of Supervisors wants public streets and they're not sure if they would support private streets. Are the wetlands and streams being left undisturbed? Yes. Neil asked, what is the rule of thumb for vehicle trips per day per household? Kevin from VDOT said for a single family, 9 trips per day. Deanna, who's a Running Deer resident, we are opposed to any connector road from Breezy Hill to Running Deer. You are spoiling our neighborhood. I'm just adding, no kidding. Neil said, your latest development proposal still does not meet the master plan standards. The density is too high and the lack of improvements to 250 have not been addressed. Paula asked, what about public transportation to the village of Rivanna? Kevin from VDOT kind of sidestepped the issue and said it's not dense enough to support public transportation, but they will continue to evaluate. Rick's report, Rick said the Clifton application will be looked at later this month, and he's looking forward to seeing the new Breezy Hill application. Donna's report, Donna just said thank you for all of you for your continued support of Rivanna CAC, and that was it.
Are there any changes or additions to the minutes?
I know, I heard, Linda, you might have sent me something and I changed it. It was a small thing, but I can't remember.
Well, let me go to
This
minutes
is,
first.
this is something I just discovered today. In the first sentence, it says that it's a by right development, but they're asking for R1 rezoning. So it's not really by right. Is that correct?
Yes,
It is not by right.
right.
Yeah. And the other thing I noticed, it says down here that the Southern Development owns those extra lots that they're not going to
Yeah.
build on.
The 2 lots
Same.
that back up.
Grant Cosner owns those lots that are in the plan this time.
Well, I was
But-
just looking on GIS today, and those lots were sold by Kimco to Breezy Hill at Keswick
Oh,
in
really?
March.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes, in March.
Interesting. Okay. Huh.
Who were they sold to?
They sold or under contract, Linda.
According to GIS, the sale date was March the 5th. Breezy Hill at Keswick LLC.
Which
That's
is
a
very-
That's who the new owner is?
Yes, well, I think that's the Southern
That's
Development
right.
people.
Yeah. Southern Development.
Breezy Hill at Keswick is Eric Showed.
Yeah, because the address is Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, that's Eric Showed.
That's the guy who lives in Glenmore on
Yeah, he lives in
Bramer.
Braemar, on Braemar Court.
Well, in my recollection of the meeting, the minutes, what the minutes should reflect was, I think Charlie said, we do, he said,
He did.
who owns us as we do. And
He
so
did.
we don't know who we is, he didn't say.
No, he did say, he said anything can be done with them and Southern Development owns them, which is the same as before. That's what he said.
Well, he's wrong.
He lied.
I remember him saying we own them or something, we control them or something like that. I don't remember.
I kind of think, unless I'm mistaken, I think they're under contract with contingency. And the contingency is whether they get approval or not. And then he would pay the rest of it. And that was the original,
So I have the sale
agreement.
price.
with the original Breezy Hill application.
Linda, what is the sale price? I'd be interested.
The sale price
No.
was $575,000 for 94-8. But there's three different pieces,
Yeah. three
parcels.
Parcels that can.
With 94.8 was not the one that we were talking about at that meeting,
Which one?
I don't think. I think we were talking about 48 and 48A. Aren't those the two that are
Yes,
Yeah.
were in the proposal, not that are toward Running Deer Drive?
Yeah, those two were also sold in March. Let's see. 48 was sold on March the 8th for 575,000. And let's
Is that
see.
the one with the house on it?
Yeah, that's the one with the house on it.
Then there's the little.
And the little one was sold on March the 5th for $575,000.
Holy man. Oh, that's the same sale, though, right? The price was for both of them.
It lists them separately, so I have no idea.
That's what they do a lot, though. That's what
So
the
should,
GIS web
getting back to
said.
the minutes, should the minutes reflect that is brought up that the ownership of the two lots was questioned and that it should be investigated further? Should we add that to the minutes?
Well, that wasn't,
Oh.
you can, I will if you want, but that isn't
Well,
what
I would
Charlie,
need the opinion.
that isn't what Charlie said.
Yeah, I think the minutes are basically accurate for what it was said at the meeting.
Right. We
Okay,
should, the minutes should include what he
that's
said.
fine.
But we can
Okay.
investigate.
And now we have new minutes.
now
that
on,
Say new
yeah.
things.
Any
Don't you
other
think-
changes or additions? suggestions?
Neil?
Yeah. So down where we had the discussion about the water line running down Running Deer Drive, and Rick said any expansion of water and sewer must be a Board of Supervisors decision. And I said,
Right.
no, but I was talking about people within the development area. So that the minutes should reflect that. But what I was saying was that people inside the development area on the west of
On the
Running
west
Deer
side.
Drive could use the county water,
Right,
without
People on
board
the east can't.
supervisors getting involved.
that's right.
And I had pointed out the convoluted path of the main road going into the development and made the observation that I believe most people would circumvent that and go straight up Running Deer.
Yeah, it's actually in here.
Okay.
Yeah. It's in my
Um,
copy. It's in the middle of the second page.
Okay.
All right, two things. Well, that's not part of the minutes, so I guess I'll bring it up later. As far as the utilities and people in the growth area on Running Deer connecting to sewer and water, what Charlie said, when he went on to explain where this is all going to be located, he implied that only people that were close to that hookup point would be entitled to, or possibly could hook up. And that's when I think Rick said that's a Board of Supervisor decision and developer can't decide that. So I don't think that if everybody on Running Deer in the growth area wanted to hook up, they could.
Well, that's not my recollection. My recollection of it was that I was asking Charlie
Mhm.
where the utilities were going to run, and he said the water line was going to come along Running Deer Drive, and I said, well, that's possibly an advantage for some of those people along there could hook to county water. And Rick said, only, it's a Board of Supervisors decision. And I said, well, I was talking about people on the west side of Running Deer Drive. And, then I guess we did talk about where the sewer line is. And as a practical matter, the sewer line is probably not going to be very accessible. It can be very expensive to try to hook to the sewer
Right.
line because it's not going to be close to anybody. But the water, it is possible that some people along the west side of Running Deer Drive could get county water. That's what I remember being said.
Okay.
My understanding of it, Neil, was that through Cindy Burton years ago, she said that all the people on the west side of Running Deer always had the chance or offered the chance to tap into a line which was in back of Farrington. They had a chance to go into that line and they chose not to because the hookup cost would be prohibitive for them. So it existed quite a while ago through Glenmore.
Yeah, at some point, they actually put those markings in the road down Running Deer where they were gonna put a water main in the road, but that never happened. That was a long time ago.
Well,
Okay.
according to what we said at the meeting, what happened at the
Yeah.
meeting was Charlie said the line's going to come down Running Deer Drive. So,
So are we going, so Neil
Well-
suggested that he wasn't quoted accurately. We're going to add that to minutes.
why don't I do this? Since some of you were not included in the minutes before, I'll resend to all of you, make any changes and then send it back to me and then I'll just correct the copies.
Good
How's
idea.
that?
Okay.
Okay,
Fine.
Approve at the next meeting then.
So the next thing on our agenda is the overview by Tori, the CAC. Those are event. All yours, Tori.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. So I'm gonna go ahead, share my screen again. Hopefully. There we go. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. This presentation will briefly cover the purpose of CACs and their requirements, including procedures and FOIA. We'll also talk a little bit about plan review, the difference between buy rate and rezonings, which I know a lot of this group is familiar with this material, but we do have some new members and just want to make sure I cover everything, especially FOIA. And happy to answer any questions this evening, but also anytime in the future, if you think of questions, feel free to email or call. So role of the CAC, there are several roles which include holding community meetings for rezonings and special use permits, assisting with master plan updates and new small area plans, and assisting with implementation and decision-making for special projects such as capital improvement projects. The CACs are an important venue for discussion and providing feedback, although CACs do not have a legislative role in the process. CACs may also serve as a public engagement role. They can help keep their community informed of projects and applications and provide information at CAC meetings, topics of interest or concerns that they're hearing from their neighbors in the community. So currently there are 7 CACs in the county that cover the 5 development areas, and there are 3 CACs for Places 29, since this is such a large geographic area. And so this is just a map from the comprehensive plan showing the development areas with their future land use plans, which is all of the colorful areas, and then the corresponding CACs for each. So the rules of procedure are the same for all of the CACs, as are the purpose, roles, and responsibilities, but the number of members and the lengths of terms do vary by CAC. And of course, Village of Rivanna typically meets on the 2nd Monday of every other month. And sometimes that schedule may change depending on if there are community meetings that need to be held. There might be more CAC meetings that are needed or other topics of interest, or there might be breaks if there's less going on. And so the Village of Rivanna CAC may have up to 10 members. Each member is appointed to a term of 2 or 3 years, and members may serve 2 consecutive terms. And additional terms can be considered by the Board of Supervisors if someone is interested in that. So the CAC also includes, of course, Planning Commissioner Rick Randolph as the Planning Commission liaison and Supervisor Donna Price as the Board of Supervisors liaison. And the Planning Commission and Board liaisons give updates as needed from the Commission and Board on topics and projects that may be of interest to this particular group. And a majority of appointed members must be present to establish a quorum, which is required to elect officers of the CAC, which we have just completed that. So again, CACs can meet more or less frequently as needed. Typically, there's 1 yearly joint meeting with all of the CACs, and this year we're aiming for a joint September meeting, so stay tuned for that. And the typical agenda structure is to call the meeting to order, which will involve reading the requirements for the emergency ordinance, since these are virtual meetings, approving minutes from the previous meeting, having scheduled presentations, Commission and Board updates, and then any other business, such as new and old business for future agenda items. So I just wanted to show, this is a screenshot from the Village of Rivanna CAC webpage on the county website. So hopefully you've all seen this page, but if you haven't, it does include links to all of the meetings. You can also go back and look at meeting materials from previous meetings. If it was a virtual meeting, there's a recording as well. And then there's also the resources with the rules and procedure, committee info, and then the fact sheet as well. So for purposes of FOIA, a meeting occurs when 3 or more members of the CAC meet for the purpose of conducting business. Agendas for CAC meetings need to be sent out and posted online at least 3 business days prior to the meeting. All CAC meetings are open to the public. Minutes need to be taken during the meeting and include the date, time, location, members present and absent, and then a summary of the discussion. So they definitely don't need to be verbatim. And then per FOIA, emails may also be considered meetings when 3 or more members are discussing CAC business, especially if the discussion is in real time and is becoming very detailed. So for example, sending out agendas or replying with topics of interest would not be a meeting. However, if 3 or more members were emailing back and forth and trying to draft a document together in real time, that would likely be considered a meeting and should not be conducted over email, but should just be discussed at the next CAC meeting. So then moving into looking at the comp plan, master plan, and then development review in the county, the state of Virginia requires localities to have a comprehensive plan for the development of their city or county, and it needs to be reviewed every 5 years. The 5-year updates can either be an update to 1 chapter or a few chapters, or could be an entire revision of the comp plan. And the county comp plan also contains the master plans for each development area and any small area plans that are adopted. And these are guiding documents that contain the vision and goals for the community. So looking at the development areas specifically in the comp plan, each chapter contains specific goals which are supported with objectives and strategies to implement those goals. And of course, one of the main components of the comp plan is the growth management policy, which directs growth to the 5% of the county's land area that is within designated development areas and reserves the remaining 95% for rural area. And development in development areas is expected to meet the 12 neighborhood model principles, and those are outlined in the comp plan and include having a variety of housing types, affordable housing, walkability, multiple modes of transportation, and relegated parking. Of course, not every development will be able to meet each of those criteria. It may not be relevant for some developments, such as ones that do not have any residential, but when possible, they should be meeting those criteria that are applicable. And the Village of Rivanna Master Plan was adopted in 2010 and then updated in 2015 and covers the Village of Rivanna development area, which includes Glenmore and Rivanna Village. And each master plan designates future land use categories for all properties within the development area, and those include recommended uses and densities. They also include proposed projects and improvements to implement the master plan, such as road improvements or new parks and trails. And unlike the comp plan and master plans, the zoning ordinance is not a guiding document, but is a regulatory document and a local ordinance. So requirements in the zoning ordinance need to be met for developments, although some are permitted to be waived either by staff, the commission, or the board of supervisors if explicitly stated in the ordinance. And the zoning ordinance contains a variety of zoning districts. Some are entirely residential, commercial, or industrial, while others are mixed use. And the zoning district of a property regulates the permitted uses and the form of buildings on the site, such as height, setbacks, and the maximum number of units. And so there are 2 types of development review, administrative and legislative. So with administrative reviews, there are several types of submittals, which include site plans, subdivision plats, and easement plats. And site plans and subdivision plats can only be approved for uses allowed by right. And if a use is not allowed by right, a rezoning or special use permit is needed for approval. And if a use is allowed by right and the applications that have been submitted meet all county and state requirements, then staff cannot legally deny the application. So to determine the type of review that's needed, a good place to start is first looking in the county's GIS and looking at the parcel and seeing what the zoning district is for that property. And if there's any restrictive features on the property like floodplain, stream buffer, and things like that. And then looking at the zoning ordinance and looking at the zoning district, each of the uses are listed out. So I just am showing the first section for the uses, but they are specifically listed out. And so the district starts by listing the by right uses. So those can just be approved administratively if all requirements are met. And then uses that are allowed by special use permit, which require legislative application. So again, if the use is permitted by right, the applicant can go ahead and proceed with their site plan and or subdivision plat. And the review will include all of the necessary reviewers. And so some applications that are minor or just amendments may not need all of the site review committee reviewers, but initial site plans and preliminary plats always require all SRC reviewers. Those include engineering, building, fire rescue, VDOT, ACSA, RWSA, E911, and then ARB if in the entrance corridor. And of course, planning as the review coordinator. And if you're ever interested in looking at a by right application, they are all publicly accessible on the county website with County View. And there are no public comment periods or public hearings with by right development. And so again, if the code requirements are met, then the application has to be approved. And so if it's not permitted by right, then either the rezoning or special use permit application is needed. And so if a use is listed in a zoning district under the special use permit uses, then an applicant can submit a special use permit and keep the same zoning district. So these are really for uses that could be compatible in the zoning district, but they may create additional impacts. And so further review and study is needed. And then there might need to be possible conditions to mitigate impacts like hours of operation. And so if the use is not allowed by right or listed under the special use permit uses, then an entirely new zoning district is needed, which is also true if the density range is not in the current zoning district. And so the applicant needs to choose the proposed zoning district based on their proposed uses and densities. So for example, if they want to develop townhouses at 10 an acre, they might rezone to the R10 residential district. If they want to develop a mixed use neighborhood with a variety of commercial, retail, and housing types, then they might rezone to neighborhood model district. And there are no conditions with rezonings, unlike special use permits. And to mitigate potential impacts, the applicant may offer proffers. And a lot of times these relate to transportation impacts. And for planned districts like neighborhood model, there needs to be an application plan with rezonings. And if the rezoning is approved, the applicant needs to submit site plans and subdivision plats that are in general accord with the application plan and contain all of the major elements. And so for the legislative review process, staff writes a staff report after reviewing the application and going through the review comments and any resubmittals. And this recommendation is based on ordinance criteria, which includes consistency with the comp plan, consistency with the applicable master plan, whether the application is meeting the purpose and intent of the requested zoning district, which if you look at each zoning district, it lists that out for its purpose and intent, and then whether potential impacts are being mitigated. And then the Planning Commission reviews the staff report and holds a public hearing and provides a recommendation. And then the Board of Supervisors holds their public hearing, reviews the Planning Commission recommendation, staff recommendation, and votes to approve or deny the application. And the CAC's role is to host a community meeting, ask questions of the developer to understand what's being proposed, and weigh in on consistency with the comp plan and master plan. And for community meetings for projects in the development areas, letters are mailed out to properties within 500 feet of the proposed project to let them know about the community meeting and how to attend. For Planning Commission meetings, letters are only mailed to adjacent properties, and for the board meeting, no letters are mailed. However, lead reviewer for projects will keep a list of community members who want to stay involved, hear updates on a project, and they will keep those email lists updated with upcoming public hearings. So that is all I have for the CAC review. Happy to answer questions if there are any, or we can jump to the next agenda item.
Tori, can you send your slide deck to us?
Yes,
That'd be
definitely.
great. Thank you.
Okay, next we will discuss the application ZMA 2021-4 Breezy Hill. If you don't mind, I'd like to make a few comments first, some things that are of concern to me. First, we know that the application density submitted by the applicant exceeded the net density, which was designated by the Planning Commission and by 39%. So the applicant claims that gross density should be the norm. Strategy 8C in the comprehensive plan addresses the different methodologies for calculating densities that are causing confusion. Section 2.2.1 in the zoning ordinance says that the entire area is available for calculation of density. When the comprehensive plan was updated in 2015, the development area land use plans were changed to show areas that should be preserved. That's in land use maps. Certainly it's the one that's in Village of Rivanna. 8C recommends that changes to the zoning ordinance are needed to make it consistent with the comprehensive plan. And this was recommended in 2015. But unfortunately, since 2015, the Board of Supervisors has taken no action to remedy this confusion, which makes it liable to future lawsuits, in addition to the confusion that already exists. Section 1.5 of the code says that the regulations in and the districts established by this chapter are intended to implement the policies, goals, and objectives of the comprehensive plan. I don't know what the rest of the committee feels, but I think that the board needs to address this as soon as possible because we have two different things going. And the applicant can always go back to the actual zoning ordinance, which clearly says gross density. Comments, questions,
Agreed.
disagreements, agreements?
I agree.
Any comment from our supervisor?
I know that this is a topic that has been brought up on a number of occasions with county leadership, and I think it's principally based upon having the adequate resources to do everything that is being required to be done by the county, and simply not having sufficient resources to do everything that we would like to get done. Maybe Commissioner Randolph can add a little bit, not to throw this on to you, Rick, but I think there's just a limitation on how many resources the county has to do all of the things that need to be done.
Well, Dennis, I would agree that there is some ambiguity, but I think there's also been some fair amount as far as the board's concerned in the time period that I was involved in 16 to 20, that we were fairly consistent in my judgment in approaching density from the standpoint of looking at the gross density and then removing whatever might be set aside for stormwater and steep slopes and other compelling environmental features, and deducting that, and then coming down to what the net density was going to be and using that as a formula. So that's all I will say about it. I remember having very active discussions with Elaine Eccles about the Adelaide application out on 250 in Crozet, just beyond where the shopping complex is there for Harris Teeter, and whether in fact gross density or net density would be applicable in that setting.
Well, here's what I would say about that. First of all, I understand what Donna is saying about everything that's on the plate of the Board of Supervisors. I have to say, this is 5 years. Certainly, in 5 years, there should have been enough time to address something that important. I mean, it seems to me we were criticized, not criticized, but comments were made in the Breezy Hill application about there being confusion in the master plan for the Village of Rivanna. We said two different things, and yet two different things are being said here. And one is a zoning ordinance, it's in the code. And I just feel, and I'm very concerned, that if a developer, no matter what we interpret the land use plan to be, it's not law. It's in the development plans. It's in the development area land use plans. It's not laws. And what is law is simply that they say, and I can quote it, it says you develop it by taking the total number of units and you take the total amount of acreage that's involved. So again, if you folks think that you can get by with using net densities, that's fine. But I still say that it really is important enough to be addressed. That's all I'll say about it.
So you're saying that the zoning ordinance refers to gross density, right?
It never mentions the word gross density. But what it does, it gives a sentence. I'll read it to you. I have it right here. .221 says density. Unless precluded by other applicable regulations, the maximum number of lots within the cluster development shall be determined by multiplying the number of acres in a parcel by the permitted density within the applicable zoning district.
Okay, so like with Breezy Hill, for example, the zoning right now is RA, and that means they've got, quite a bit fewer,
Units.
development, units that they could put in there now, but they have to seek a zoning map amendment. So they got to change the zoning.
Right, that's what the
So
applicant is doing.
If in the course of changing the zoning and submitting all the application with the plans and all, and it has in there a certain number of lots, certain layout of lots, if they then get that approved, can they then say, oh, wait, we get to change all of this because of the zoning ordinance?
Well, no,
Because
I'm
we
really
got to do
concerned.
zoning, and so we're now going to base it on that?
I'm taking it the other way. Charlie,
Aren't they constrained by what the Board of Supervisors has approved, the application that the Board of
The
Supervisors has
applicant
approved?
asked for 80 units. There's 78 acres. He's saying that constitutes 1 unit per acre in his ZMA. The staff has said there's only 58 acres that are net acres. Thus, he is exceeding the 1 unit per acre. The zoning ordinance says you just multiply the number of acres by the permitted density.
But you could only do that if the zoning had been changed, which it has not yet been.
No, it just says the maximum allowable.
I think we keep visiting this again and again. Here we are, how many years later, back on the board, and we're still visiting the same thing with the same questions. So I think Dennis's point that maybe the supervisors could bump it up on their agenda to look at and make clear, so we're not wasting so much time having these same types of conversations over and over again. And it's great that Rick was on the board back then, and that he's here now on the Board of Supervisors, and so he can pass that on. But there's a time that'll come all too soon that new people will be on, and they'll be struggling with the same thing over and over again.
Just to jump in and clarify real quick too, I have not looked at their application carefully, but I'm not sure if they are proffering a maximum number of units, because that would, be different than a normal, typical by right development if they were actually proffering a maximum.
Well, it's not a by right development.
Right. So if it was actually, currently right now already R1, that's correct, that it would just be, 80 times 1 for 80 acres times 1 unit an acre. But since they're asking for a rezoning.
No, it's RA right now.
Right.
He's asking for R1. He's
Right.
saying He has 78 acres, he wants 80 units. He's using gross density calculations. That's in the regulation.
Right, so if it's already, if it were already R1, then they would just be using, right, that gross density calculation, but since they're asking for rezoning in the comp plan, it refers to the net density calculation specifically for rezonings.
The comp plan expresses specifically the confusion that exists and mentions that the zoning ordinance does not agree with the comp plan. It mentions it specifically, it brings it up, not me. The
Right,
comp plan itself brings up the problem. That's all I'm saying. Let's go to the next thing.
I just like to say, I was reading before, Megan was the one who said this is a by right development.
But it isn't.
It is.
not.
That's what she said.
It's not by right.
You're just saying it was Megan.
It was
not-
Megan who said that. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, they could just drop the whole thing and come in by right with what they're entitled to, but it would be a totally different number of units in there. I'm not even sure. I think the calculation that they would be entitled to by right for the entire parcel, which included the 9+ acres that have been excluded this time, would be 24. And I think that was Megan's best guess.
Yeah, there are by rights on each individual parcel, making up the total Breezy Hill land. There's a whole bunch of individual parcels, but they're not asking for by right. So let's go by that. Does anyone have any comments to make about the connector, required VDOT connector? Because I have some thoughts on that.
I'm not sure why they continue to pursue the running deer angle when they know that that's not going to be popular. And there are, perhaps other possibilities that would cost a little more money that are available.
They're doing it because they have to have two.
Well, I mean,
VDOT says,
what I'm saying is there would be possible to get to by not using running deer, by, going in another direction.
What direction?
First of all,
There was
Okay.
a,
All they need is 2 exits onto 250. So it's possible to get those 2 from Breezy Hill itself.
On the frontage, yes, agreed.
or
I think-
into Rivanna Village.
I think they mean adjacent roads. I don't think they mean the same road. They give examples of that in the VDOT document where they say, they show diagrams and they show that if it's in the same road, it's not the same as being an adjacent road. But let me go on.
Right.
First of all, the development area, and this is very important to me, ends down the center of Running Deer Drive. So traffic exiting Breezy Hill to get to 250 will travel 1 mile through the rural area, not the development area. So in essence, we have a connector which is going into the rural area. In addition, 1/2 of Breezy Hill approximately is in the rural area. And the installation of this connector would have the unintended result of disrupting the rural atmosphere in this community. Let's look at a little history. And Linda found this out for me. In the late 70s or 80s, the residents of Running Deer gave their unpaved road to VDOT for construction of Route 808, Running Deer Drive. Now, this was a forerunner to the Code of Virginia Rural Rustic Road Program, which is titled 33.2-332. That was established in 2002. In essence, this brought the county and the state into a formalized process, which wasn't formalized before, involving a county where the county can designate a highway or highway segment as a rural rustic road, provided that such highway or highway segment is located in a low density development area and has an average daily traffic volume of more than 1,500 vehicles per day. VDOT formalized their rustic road development program in July 2008, and they have a whole big brochure on it. On page 1 of this program, it stated that the county board has to indicate, in order to designate something a rustic rural road, that that growth in traffic is not expected to increase significantly over the next 10 years. VDOT in its publication issues guidelines for this designation, rural rustic road. Running Deer Drive satisfies all the guidelines except for not being an unpaved road. I would urge the county, and there should be some discussion on this. I want to know what you think. I would suggest to the county to adopt a resolution designating Running Deer Drive as a rural rustic road retroactively, because it was paved before the program came into effect. However, aside from that, it satisfies all the other requirements of a rural rustic road. I would urge the county to adopt a resolution, which they're entitled to do, designating Running Deer Drive as a rural rustic road retroactively. I find nothing in the law that would prevent this. And since VDOT's only role in the process is to consider accepting paving a road, which has already been done, the decision would seem to be exclusively in the county's hands. Now, why do this? Why is this important? Because I believe, and I may be wrong, it would be much more difficult to add a connector to a rural rustic road legally than to an existing secondary road within the development area. The VDOT regulation was never intended to do this. And I would suggest that supervisors or our supervisor or somebody speak with the residency administrator of the Charlottesville residency about this situation. I think that this is just an important an item, if not more important, than the density issue for Breezy Hill. Because this has the possibility of completely disturbing the traffic in a rural community. Now on page 8 of VDOT's own brochure, there's a sample resolution for this program, and it can be modified slightly to account for the retroactive nature of the resolution. Comments? Silence means negative or positive or what?
Thinking.
It means that we're thinking about it.
Okay, let's think.
All right. Is this something that we can propose?
Well, I just proposed it. Now we're going to discuss it to see if we want to propose it as a committee.
That's what
We're supposed to advise
we can
the
propose as a
supervisors.
committee.
Pardon me?
That's what I meant. Is this
Yeah.
something we can propose as a committee?
I don't see why not. We're supposed to advise.
Well, what does the rural rustic road designation mean as far as VDOT is concerned, or, you know?
It was
what is
originally developed, Neil, when a community wanted to have a road paved. So what they would do, that land would be given to VDOT free. The county then, where the road was located, would have to designate it as a rustic rural road. They'd go in consultation with VDOT regarding paving of the road, and there were certain standards for these roads, which involve environmental checks, the width of the road, the grade of the road can't be up to the same grade as Route 250. So VDOT's part of it is whether they would accept this to pave the road. But the qualifications to determine whether it's a rural rustic road would be that it had to be in a rural community, not much traffic, less than 1,500 cars a day. I believe if you take 10 trips per house in Running Deer, it comes out to around 680, 690 trips a day.
Right.
So it's way below that. And that's why it seems to me that it already is a rural rustic road. It's just never been designated that, because the action predated state law and it predated VDOT's subsequent regulations. In fact, VDOT only has suggested samples for applications. They suggest. The real power is in the county.
So it was a way to get roads which were informal roads, or roads were private roads or something, into the state system.
Could be either. They have to go into state system if VDOT built the road.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that section between the Keswick Country Club and the post office. It was gravel at first,
Right.
compacted gravel, and then the
Desert
VDOT
gravel.
paved it over a little bit. I mean, it's a really rough paving, but it's better than gravel.
So that was not like a state road when it was, I mean, doesn't the state have roads that are gravel, packed gravel?
I don't know.
Yes, they do. Just because the road is unpaved doesn't mean it's not a state road.
Yeah.
It's a state road if the land is given to the state, correct? State owns the land, right, Rick?
Or they have a right of way.
That's a legal question.
Well,
I'm not going to touch that.
okay. What do you think, Paula?
I think everything should be done to preserve Running Deer, the Running Deer community as the community that it is. I think it's a travesty and in my mind almost borders on a bait and switch that, oh, well, half the road is part of this development and half the road isn't. And it's going to become the main entrance that people will use. And nobody in their right mind is going to go through the winding, curvy road, especially in the back of that division. They're going to go all the way up Running Deer, and it goes all the way up. So I don't have a horse in the game of living there, but it just totally goes against my grain of what I believe was being thought out when we're looking at the development area. It isn't to encroach on the surrounding or the contiguous.
I will say that VDOT was following regulations. They only did what was in their regulations. However, I think there are extenuating circumstances in this case. It's not the typical, let's have a connector to an adjoining community.
Right.
It's special. And I really think that it would help immensely if the county was involved in this. Certainly from our conversation in the community meeting, Charlie Armstrong originally wanted that connector just be used for emergency exit. And VDOT said, no, it has to be a full connector.
Yeah.
So I don't think he would object.
I mean, that's not big enough to say it's going to be a traffic problem. It is just needing a second entrance for emergency and.
Well, you have garbage trucks, Breezy Hill, you have delivery trucks, big vans. They might all take the chance to take the opportunity rather to go down 1 mile of straight road at 40 miles an hour and then head in.
Ooh. In our
There's a
30
reason
mile
why
an
they
hour
put
zone.
I just think it's a shame and it's a serious problem with regard to this.
It is.
And the traffic that goes up and down that road now, it isn't likely, I haven't counted it personally, but I wouldn't think it's likely to exceed that 10 per lots that you were talking about. And so the impact and on the increase, the number of that actually increases traffic on that would just be.
I doubt we're even close to
My
10.
question. If we as a committee want to propose designating Running Deer Drive as a rural rustic road, how do we go about doing it?
We suggest it to the county.
Yeah, we just.
The county then decides where they want to take it up.
But then
County is a body.
how do we go about doing that? Do we present a written request? Do we make an oral request? Is there a form we fill out?
Our supervisor is attending this meeting.
All right, maybe Donna can advise how we would go about this.
I think you just go ahead and make your recommendation. We've got county staff here as well. And then that can get processed through and evaluated by county staff. And from there, we just have to see where it takes it after that. But, you know, I'm not in a position right now to say yay or nay in terms of supporting that. I think you make your request. We have it evaluated by county staff and it works its way up through the system would be the way to do it.
Any other? Go ahead, Don.
This seems like a needle in the haystack. Because there have been so many things that are listed in the master plan that have been ignored. Density is one, 250 is another.
Exactly right.
Why do you think that with this minor thing of changing the status of a road, that would have an impact on Breezy Hill?
Because first of all, the residents of Running Deer are very concerned about it.
Well, I absolutely.
So,
But I mean, I'm talking about from the builder's perspective and the county perspective. I don't think they'll care.
I don't know. I'm not ready to say that. All I can say is we do our job in recommending this.
Yeah, I think there would be a stronger argument to not have Running Deer be a connector for Breezy Hill if Running Deer had this designation. I think it would help the argument that Running Deer should be left out of the equation here. That's where I think you're coming from, Dennis. And I agree with you. I think it would help make the case that Running Deer should not be a connector for Breezy Hill.
I think it also brings focus on that situation with Running Deer and may spur a little look around the other side of Breezy Hill to see what might make more sense connecting to an already developed area in the
Oh, doesn't Breezy Hill abut Limestone?
Say again, please.
Doesn't Breezy Hill abut Limestone Farm?
No,
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 It does
No.
not. Okay.
Running Deer does.
yeah.
well, no, I don't think so. Does it?
It's a ways up the road.
Over the past several years, since this whole Breezy Hill thing started, several times it has been suggested, why don't you put 2 exits on 250? And at the last meeting, how about an exit through Rivanna Village? And those were ignored.
Well, there's no exit to Rivanna Village. No road going through there. That would have to go through our place, not going through there.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, we don't want to mess with Neil.
Ain't gonna happen.
There was, staff did propose an exit, a connector at the end of Pendower, New Pendower, to Rivanna Village. And that was defeated because of the fact that traffic could only go one way because Glenmore is a private community. So it wouldn't be a connector at all. It would just be
Yeah,
an exit
No.
for Glenmore.
okay.
Okay, I don't want to take a lot of time pursuing this. I just want to know the feeling. Just show of hands. Is the feeling that you'd like to support this or not? All in favor? Raise your hand. Okay.
I think it would help make the case.
This is a recommendation we would make. And actually, these are 2 of the prominent points. There may be others that come up when the application is reviewed further that I have with regard to the present Breezy Hill. It's been previously expressed that the transportation issue, especially since the application has been reduced from 160, 120 down to 78 or 80 right now, is much less of an issue than it was before. So these are 2 things we're hanging on. Net density exceeds it by 39% and the connector road. Any other comments before we leave this?
Well, the transportation thing is still, as far as I can see, a problem. The fact that Route 250 has not been improved as it's supposed to be in the master plan.
Well, you're certainly right.
Plan.
In fact, as you have pointed out many times, the comprehensive plan in defining a village says it's also to be supplied with multimodal connectors, having
Right,
sufficient capacity.
Right.
So,
right. So it
We
can't
make up
even be a
these plans.
village.
right, we make up these plans and then we don't observe them.
Well,
I think-
that's the problem. And the master plan recommends 65 units for Breezy Hill.
65. Well, it recommends 1 unit per acre.
Well,
And if you-
65 is the net acreage.
No, it's 65 if you include those 2 other parcels.
Okay.
Oh,
you're
that's right.
it is.
Yeah.
I thought I heard Charlie, when we talked about the 250 improvements, refer to the diamond thing as, I had the feeling like he was feeling that was sufficient improvement on 250.
Well, it's not.
It's not
And
going to
the-
help us
the
out
master
here.
plan, the master plan has specific, improvements, which we took from VDOT and the county's Eastern Albemarle sub-area study. Things that they recommended, VDOT and Albemarle County recommended be done for Route 250 to try to get it adequate for the traffic it had on it. In 2005, it was not adequate. And those included widening Route 250, including widening it over where the railroad is there. And that's not happened. And there's very little chance it's going to happen, apparently.
I agree.
So it seems to me, they clearly should turn down this application.
I agree with you, Neil. I just kind of had the feeling, that's what I understood Charlie to say. And if that's what he's operating on.
So from what I've heard in previous discussions, although I agree with you, I just don't think it's going to fly. I just don't think there'll be enough votes against it because of that reason. I do think there was adequate discussion and forceful discussion regarding the protection of rural areas, regarding the fact that the master plan shows a decreasing density that should radiate out from the center of the village.
Right.
And so we're addressing those things right now. The Planning Commission has said on more than one occasion, they're going to take net density because that's in the land use plans, the maps that are in the land use plans, certainly for Village of Rivanna. So I think I don't want to pursue, although I agree with you, I don't want to put all our eggs in pursuing a strategy which is not going to achieve anything. I'd rather try to pursue a strategy which has real meat to it.
Well, I'm not saying you don't pursue any other strategy. I'm just saying that's what the master plan says. And my advice as a member of the committee is that the application does not conform to the master plan and the comprehensive plan. And, this is like, we had this whole master planning process. And I've been, going through this for since this became a development area. And this is the first application that we've ever had while the master plan was in force.
Right.
And if we just toss the master plan aside now, all it tells you is that the master planning process is a scam,
Here's the difficulty, and these were the arguments I heard. The master plan in the back lists all of the specific projects that are outlined, widening 250, specifically showing maps of how it's going to be done. In the Board of Supervisor discussion, it was said more than once, and with with consultation and comments by the transportation planner, that this doesn't look to be something that's going to happen in the very near future. It isn't even one of the 40 projects that's listed by the county on Smart Scale to be considered. So it says in the wording that it's essential that all of the projects be completed before any new development is allowed. It links it specifically to projects. I would have, in retrospect, I would have rather have said it is essential that Route 250 be a Class C road instead of a Class F road before new development is allowed, because that's really the crux of it. It shouldn't be hinged upon specifically completing certain projects, which 5 years later aren't even being suggested. That's the problem with it, in my eyes. And that's where we are. That's the dilemma we face.
I think another issue, I think maybe this is a better way of wording what I was trying to get at before. Again, going back to running deer. You know, there's a promise for a buffer zone between the rural area and the development area. And instead of, I mean, if 2 lots are considered a buffer zone, I don't know that anybody else would interpret that as a buffer zone. And instead of creating a buffer zone, and that's not a wide piece of property or you know, it's smaller in comparison to others. It's not creating a buffer zone, it's encroaching on the rural zone.
It's not creating a buffer zone if there's,
Absorbing it.
if they won't commit themselves to not developing it later. There's no problem. He was asked
And that's only 2
specifically.
lots. That's not a buffer zone to the rural.
You're
area.
right. He said buffer zone, but then he said it could be developed later.
Right, and it's only a buffer zone in that small area where those 2 lots are. The rest, there's not really a significant buffer zone, and instead they're incorporating half or more of running deer into, maybe not on paper, but in reality, it's being absorbed.
Well, in his last plan, before it was turned down, he had 1 acre lots plotted in that area. So it was more than the 20 feet that it would exist if it was completely developed up to the woods where running deer starts. Is there any
Another
more
piece of it is that blocks 3 and 4 sort of wrap around the Hearns Lane area, and they're going to cut all those trees down. There's going to be no buffer there for those people. I mean, it's just going to blow that up completely.
And you talk about a rustic road, go back along Hearns Lane, because I've driven back to the end. It's really rustic. And it's and on the north side, it has woods.
Do we know if the intent is clear cut?
Have you ever seen a development that didn't do that?
Yes, I have, but
Really? Oh, wow.
There's one named Rick or Donna. There's no, am I correct in assuming there's no specific restrictions on cutting in these developments? In this particular one?
You're asking under state law, are there any restrictions for
No,
development?
I'm asking if in any of the discussions that were held in the previous Breezy Hill application process, whether there are any discussion about a prohibition on cutting raised by either the commissioners or the supervisors or staff.
You're asking a question that's so broad, I don't think any of us can answer that. I don't think Tori can answer that on behalf of staff. I can't answer that in terms of the Planning Commission. I don't know whether Donna can answer that for the board.
Tori, did staff comment on it in any of their comments?
I have not reviewed this application. I have not been the lead reviewer on it.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what was discussed.
So maybe, we could find out if there's been any recommendations as to the procedure of land clearing methods being used. I know another thing that really disturbed me was when we were talking about Rivanna Village and they were talking about burning all of the brush. So, I'm just trying to look down the road and maybe anticipate some things before that supervisors might want to address before they are faced with them on a timeline.
So in this meeting, we are, as a committee, discussing Breezy Hill and discussing what we consider to be our next step in commenting on this. And we've already had a lot of this discussion, which is going to be in minutes. Is there anything else that you'd like to bring up? Okay, let's move to the next one. We're up to the updates on the Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission. Who wants to speak first? Planning
I'll go
Commission?
ahead and, I'll go ahead and go first.
Okay.
Last board meeting last week, we talked about some additional opportunities to improve the Rivanna Greenway project. Monticello Foundation, they purchased some property in Rivanna River, and they are going to look to do some surveying and efforts to try and improve that. We had a long discussion about a particular homestay application as a special use, as an exception, where really what ended up coming out is it looked more like this particular property was being reformatted into a mini hotel rather than a homestay. And so it's gone back to for further analysis. And we spent a good bit of time talking about what I think is part of what your conversation here this evening is, and that's the impact of decisions as they affect development. In particular, it was the discussion of the board-to-board with the school board because of what's happening with Mountain View Elementary School and action, whether they may have to move the 5th grade to a different, to Walton Middle School because of insufficient capacity in the facility there. And it's the same thing, whether it be the school, the roads, or other infrastructure issues. It's an inherent tension between supply and demand, and trying to reach that balance in allowing there to be growth while not overwhelming the resources that we have. Of course, part of the other discussion that came out on that is the recognition that there are jurisdictional decisions that are only under the control of the school board, and other jurisdictional decisions that are only under the control of the Board of Supervisors. But the reality is that there is a cross impact on their decisions and our decisions on the Board of Supervisors, Board of Supervisor decisions onto the impact onto the schools, which also affects the quality of life of individuals. And then we also approved some rather extensive zoning amendments, which I think also relates to part of what we were talking about here today. Our overall zoning ordinances have not had a major revision in a number of years. And so what we're doing is working on sort of, if you will, chapter by chapter, trying to make some improvements there. And a lot of the amendments that we approved last week were, in my language, recognition of the complexities of development. And so a number of changes were made with regard to timelines and processes, because it is complex and there are different steps and stages that have to go through with a variety of different areas that need to be considered. It was a relatively short meeting. Our meeting coming up next week will also be a short one. We don't have a heavy workload right now on board. The county staff does still have a heavy workload. We still have, I believe it's 18 positions that have been left unfilled as a result of the pandemic. And our our Deputy Director of Community Development, has announced her retirement at the end of the year. So we have a lot of work to do to get our staff back up to the numbers that we need in order to be able to continue to do the work that needs to be done.
Thank you. Rick?
I want to revisit this question about whether a rural road that is unpaved, whether it can be a state road. I just want to point out to you, I think the best example to make this clear to you, any of you that have taken the back way down to Scottsville, which means you take the Blenheim Road and you go over the new bridge across the Hardware River. You come up that hill and then you proceed on down towards Scottsville. You'll find that there's about a half mile, 3/4 of a mile section of that road that remains a gravel road. You're on a state road, but it's a gravel road. Now, there has been an effort by one individual to have that section of the gravel road paved.
Right.
And however, under VDOT's criteria, to have a gravel road repaved, you have to have 70, I think it's 70%, maybe 75%. So don't quote me on the exact percentage. But you have to have a more than a majority of the adjoining landowners agreeing that they accede to having the road paved. In this case, one individual has proposed to actually pay personally for the paving of the road. I'm not mentioning any names. So there remains to this date a certain degree of creative tension between this individual who would like to see this section of road paved because it connects to other properties that the individual owns to the north on Blenheim Road. And then you have the surrounding residents who are determined not to see their rural bucolic road go the way of the rest of Blenheim Road. So this is a state road, just as the section beyond the entrance to Keswick Hall is a state road when it was a gravel road. And it was proposed to be paved and it was held off because the supervisor for the Rivanna district was told by one property owner on that road that they were opposed to having it paved because it would result in more speeding on the road. And ultimately, however, the road now, as you realize, has been paved and there's less dust. And anyone that speeds on that road, given the fact that you've got to go around a blind curve and you have to cross a railroad track, is just asking for trouble with a capital T. The other news I have for you, I don't really want to talk about applications on the Avon Street corridor and what might be going on down in Woolen Mills. But I do want to let you know that, as you are well aware, Tiger Fuel proposed to site a convenience gas station market on 626 on property that was zoned both highway commercial, and the back section of the property was actually in the rural area. So you had split zoning on the piece of property that they were acquiring. They, however, submitted that they only wanted to go ahead and develop at this time the section of land that was highway commercial. The board, in first confronting this issue, which is one of a non-complying zoning in a rural area. So Dennis, you're talking about contradictions between the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. This was a perfect case. We worked on this as a board of supervisors. The planning commission rejected the application. The board rejected the application, and the owners of Tiger decided to take it to court. And I'm happy to report that in the last month, the local court found in favor of the Board of Supervisors and cited the fact that they were within their rights under the comprehensive plan to go ahead and enforce the expectation that, in fact, the gasoline station was inappropriate in this location. Gasoline station, convenience store, / convenience store. So that's where it stands. I don't know whether Tiger Fuel is going to appeal it. They have a right to do so under our legal system. I don't think they're going to have much of a leg to stand on because the opinion was fairly strong from the standpoint of the county. So that was happy news. And the residents across the street in Machunk community were obviously delighted with that outcome. And they were very concerned about their customary enjoyment of their street and the quietude of their community being compromised by a large gas station that would have been open 24/7 for gasoline. The market would have been limited in its hours initially, but the gas component would have operated around the clock. Anyhow, that's all I have to report.
Thank you.
Any questions of Donna or Rick?
The Breezy Hill proffer says something about a planning commission hearing on Breezy Hill on June the 15th. I'm assuming that's not happening. No.
News, that would be news to me. That is not something that we have discussed is going to be on the Planning Commission agenda
Okay.
coming up. I can tell you, let me just look at the agenda if anybody else has a question while I do that.
My question would go further. Are there any plans to have a hearing on Breezy Hill anytime this summer? Because we're not slated to have another meeting of our CAC until after summer.
Dennis, at this point, unless Tori knows otherwise, I don't believe Breezy Hill has been scheduled. It is not, definitively, it is not occurring on the 15th. We're looking at the RST application, which is Route 29, right there at Forest Lakes. And then we're looking at the Albemarle County Service Authority proposal for expanded facility on Avon Street Extended. Those are the only two issues before the Planning Commission on the 15th.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Rick or Donna? Okay, let's move on to new or old business. Anybody have any old or new business to bring up? Neil?
I've been wondering, one thing I'd like to know about, maybe we can do this at a future meeting, or maybe somebody knows the answers to these things now. I've been wondering about on 250, the area, the properties that are commercial are either currently have commercial uses and or that used to have commercial uses, and but going back, they were commercial before there was zoning, I think. And now they're kind of in RA, like the old Moose Lodge is now got a for sale sign saying it's residential zoning or something. That little building, which I think was a gas station on the south side of 250 next to Cumbria Lane there, that somebody's now putting a building behind it, but they're preserving the weird little building, which looks like, I don't know why they're doing that. I mean, it looks like a prime candidate to be torn down. And like the antique stores and the train and what's that guy's name? The
garage
complex. And the garage, the auto place, which has been continuously auto repair under different hands. I just wonder what happens when one of those places, if one of those stops being an active store, does it lose its commercial zoning capability or what? That's, maybe we could either, hear about that at some future meeting, or maybe somebody knows something.
Oh, I think I saw Donna and Rick both nodding their head no, so they might have an answer.
Does it
Your
retain
answer-
its commercial status if it stops operating as a commercial entity?
Yeah, current utilization does not necessarily change zoning, would be the simple way I would describe it. Once it's been zoned commercial, it would stay commercial unless there's a rezoning.
I mean, I'm not sure they're zoned. Some of them might be commercial. I think they're mostly RA. I don't know. That's, that's sort of what I'm wondering.
Well, Neil, I think some of them, again, are non-conforming uses in a rural area. That's what you're dealing with here.
And so what does that mean?
That means that technically, under the comprehensive plan, they should be RA, but for various reasons, and the one you identified, that they actually were granted a commercial license and they opened a business in that location prior to the comprehensive plan coming into operation 1983. Therefore, they are a non-conforming use in a rural area. And
If sold, would continue that status?
yes, yeah,
Thank
they would be able, as long as they continue with the same use. Now, if they're going to change the use, then that raises an issue that they would probably, Tori, correct me if I'm wrong, they probably need to apply for a special use permit if their use was going to be different than that which is consistent with the existing use right now on, albeit non-conforming on that piece of property. It gets complicated. Again, it's the issue. There is a lack of uniformity and symmetry between the comprehensive plan and the zoning on property. And we have that throughout the county.
So it makes it fun.
It does. Makes it interesting. Now, the board did agree, if you go a little further on 250 going west, you remember where those two houses are that
Yeah.
are sitting there, right where you go into UPS,
Right.
up the grade.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
those two houses, above them sits a automotive repair business.
right.
And an applicant applied for permission to go ahead and put a coffee shop in there. The board had an active discussion about that while I was on the board, and we ended up approving it mainly because of the argument that I made that the rest of the domiciles, the buildings on that street are all of a commercial nature. So technically, yes, that is a rural area building, but everything else above it and across from it, except across the street, which is totally rural area because it's owned by the
Right.
Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation. But everything else in there is saturated with a commercial dimension to it. So why don't we allow this individual to go ahead and set up a coffee shop? But I guess he was going to do it, and then lo and behold, COVID comes along and he held off on opening. I've been waiting to see if there'd been any changes. Perhaps Supervisor Price knows of something on that front.
I don't right now, but I think what Rick has just discussed, and if I might just sort of pontificate a little bit, sometimes what we have to look at is it better to have a utilization that is consistent with some of the surrounding properties rather than have abandoned properties are not going to be utilized? Because, for example, and I would just, again, I'm just sort of postulating here, but those two residences were unlikely to be viable on a real estate market when you've got the other businesses around them. So sometimes things happen, perhaps not necessarily according to a designed plan, but the overall utilization is better for the county than to have two abandoned houses that are falling apart.
Actually, Donna, what they did, they had a business in there in those two buildings, which was into the insignia, corporate identity, branding type supplies, T-shirts, golf shirts, all that kind of stuff. I actually met them, the owners of that business, back when I was involved with the chamber in 2007 and 2008 and 9. And then their business went belly up in the aftermath of the 2007, 2008 near depression. And the building sat there idle for a decade until this individual decided, well, maybe it would be a great spot for a coffee shop. So they all along had a kind of commercial nature to them. Nobody was living in them.
I didn't know if maybe at first they were like model homes or something for a building,
That's what I
Yes,
thought.
that was it.
but they were clearly not being utilized as residential property
Yeah.
for
it was
several years.
Residence is
Yeah.
used as commercial.
Any other comments? Oh, sorry, anybody else?
Well, so the spaces, you know, like the Moose Lodge and the Antique Mall and the those other commercial spaces on 250 across from the village of Rivanna. If they could, you're saying that if somebody wanted to put a different business in one of those places, they'd have to get a special use permit or something, that it would not, you couldn't just change it to some other kind of business?
I'm not saying that because it depends on, I don't know on each one of those properties when they were permitted by the county to operate that business. So I can't give you an answer on that because technically I don't know that. And they would be allowed, if they were granted a permission to operate a certain commercial business in the category of commercial businesses applicable under that, whatever businesses could operate under that category, any other related business in the category could operate there, if not that business. But that if you wanted to do something completely different, yes, you'd probably need to get a special use permit. But I can't give you a definitive answer because it depends on when they got the permit to go ahead and open that kind of a business. So if they're saying that they're now a residential area, you know, maybe they are, but I would have to look at the zoning and have to see how the county views that piece of property to give you a full answer.
Anything else under new or old business? I have some things. Aside from the consideration of new applications, what I see the future business of our CAC being focused on is preparing for the updating of our master plan, which is going to follow the completion of the Crozet master plan whenever that happens. And to me, the important steps in this process are educating all of the CAC members and also Village of Rivanna residents on our existing master plan to be sure that everybody completely understands it. And I talked with Tori about this in emails, and I think it's possible to do that. The question is getting village residents interested enough to participate in this. We have a problem in which the people who are most interested are the older people, older residents. It's difficult to get the younger residents, if not impossible almost, interested. And they're the ones that we're going to pass the flag to in the future. And so I think you need to be, I would suggest we all be thinking about the best ways to do this. You know, when we had our letter writing campaign, we got everybody interested in it, but there was a cause. Well, there's another cause, and the cause is that our master plan is coming up for review. And don't be thinking that Breezy Hill will be the last project that we'll ever see, because there are other properties besides Neal's where the owners may die, they may sell, and the new owners may decide to do something with the property besides just living in it by themselves. So there's always that concern. Now, when we go over the master plan, we have to look at the language and what improvements can be made to language to make it less ambiguous or not ambiguous at all. Because there's some concern that it may have parts in it that are ambiguous. We also need to find and encourage younger residents to fill out the vacancies on the CAC. I'm forever going around and talking to people. I would urge all of you to kind of do the same thing. It can be rewarding. It's a meeting every 2 months. It involves contributing back to your community. We can't just take from a community, we just have to give back too. So those are my thoughts. So I understand, Tori, if you'd clear this up for me, that there probably won't be another meeting until after summer.
The next meeting is scheduled tentatively for the second Monday in August, which I think is August 9th.
Okay, so there is one scheduled for August. We are not going to skip that then.
That's right.
Okay,
Unless I hear from enough people that will be, traveling or out of town and we wouldn't have a quorum, then we could skip it. But for now, that's the tentative meeting date.
probably by the start of July, it might be a good idea to poll the members to see if that's true, or if you could do it or I could do it, whatever you want. Okay. Any other business anyone wants to bring up? Okay, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for participation. Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Rick.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.